Hello, this is Jules. This is an intermediate level video, so if there are terms or concepts I mentioned that are unfamiliar to you, you might want to check out the Start Here playlist and/or the Glossary playlist, both of which I'll link below in the description. I'll also include a few specific links for concepts that are particularly relevant. Spiritual Autolysis is a term that Jed McKenna uses, but it's something I was doing long before I learned this term for it. And I think my definition might be slightly different than his. I think when Jed uses the term, he's specifically referring to spiritual development, whereas I also use it to refer to Tier 2 consciousness development. And I think Jed is specifically referring to a journaling technique that causes transformation, whereas I sometimes use the term to refer to the transformation itself. Nevertheless, I really like the term, so I'm stealing it. Autolysis means self-digestion, and it's an apt term for the process it describes. You metaphorically eat through progressive layers and layers of your own false self, so that you can get to deeper and deeper, more and more true layers of yourself and reality, which are actually the same thing. If you keep at it, eventually you'll drill all the way down to absolute truth. It is the process that is involved in both Tier 2 consciousness progression and spiritual development. However, it is not the process that is involved in Tier 1 consciousness progression. In Tier 1 consciousness progression, you are constructing yourself, whereas spiritual autolysis is the opposite. It is deconstructing the self, getting to subtler and subtler layers of the self, and eventually to no self at all, which is exactly what is happening in both Tier 2 consciousness progression and in spiritual development. If you want to intentionally speed up your process of spiritual autolysis, it is possible to do it as pure mental contemplation, but I find it's much more effective to get it out in writing, typing, audio recording, or video recording, where you can examine things outside of your head. One way to do intentional spiritual autolysis is by trying to write down something that is undeniably true, and then keep trying. This is how Jed does it. A good default way to do this is by trying to answer the question, who am I? Answer that question the best way that you can, then examine your answer and see if you can poke any holes in it. If you can, then try to write a better answer. Rinse, repeat. But you can really start anywhere with any statement that you believe to be true. Do you believe that we can eventually understand everything with science? If so, you can start by writing that down. Then look at it and see if you can poke any holes in it. If you can find any flaws at all, anything about the statement that isn't verifiably true, then try again. Try to write a new statement that's better, that is verifiably true. If you believe anything you have ever learned or heard from someone else, including anything I have said on this channel, write it down, then poke holes in it. If you believe that there is no absolute truth whatsoever, write that down, then poke holes in it. Is it absolutely true that there is no absolute truth? If you believe that you can't know anything, write that down. I can't know anything. Then poke holes in it. If I can't know anything, then how do I know that I can't know anything? And who is doing the knowing? Who is this I that I'm talking about anyway? Does this I really exist? How do I know? And what does it mean to know or not know something? What do I mean by this word know? What is knowledge? It can be particularly helpful to pretend that you're writing to someone, that you're trying to transmit the most true and valuable things that you've learned to your child, your previous self, your future self, your deceased loved one, your student, your mentee, whoever's going to read this when you publish it, etc. Trying to explain something to someone else can be very helpful in clarifying it for yourself. Or another way to approach intentional spiritual autolysis is by trying to ask better and better questions. Try to find the ultimate question, the one question to rule them all, the one question that, if you could answer it, would render all other questions obsolete. It doesn't work to ask someone else for the ultimate question, just like it doesn't work to ask someone else to tell you the ultimate answer. You have to find it for yourself. These two methods are really just two different angles on the same thing. In practice, you usually end up both asking yourself questions and posing potential answers, and then asking yourself questions about those answers, etc. It doesn't really matter exactly how you do it. The point is to put all of your assumptions and most deeply held beliefs under the microscope. Everything you believe about yourself, about reality, about what is worth examining about yourself and reality, even about thinking itself, and figure out what's true and what's false. This is what the dialectic method that Plato used in his dialogues was originally for: discernment of truth. Spiritual autolysis requires active learning, and I find that it works best when combining multiple types of active learning together. I'll include a link below to my How to Learn video that explains active learning. The journaling methods I just described are one type of active learning, but you can then also add other kinds of active learning to bring in fresh perspectives. For example, direct experiences in manifested reality and other types of reality, experiments in one's life or thought experiments in one's head, external research. So long as you're using active learning methods with it, and it's best to look for sources that are either at or slightly ahead of where you're at. Active inner research, for example, asking questions of your inner guidance or trusted inner contacts, downloading from the Akashic records, divination. In fact, you may notice that when engaged in the process of spiritual autolysis, you naturally become an insatiable and somewhat impatient sponge. But there is an important distinction to be made here. It is very tempting to fall into the trap of thinking that you are doing research and exploration in order to gather more facts and opinions, that by gaining more knowledge, you can eventually have enough knowledge to understand everything, and that will show you the absolute truth. But you cannot learn the absolute truth that way. For the purposes of spiritual autolysis, the active learning methods I just described are not about amassing more facts and opinions. They're about progressively whittling away, refining and refining, scraping away everything that is false. Spiritual autolysis is about burning away all of your false beliefs until there is nothing left but the truth. The problem is that it can be difficult to see our most deeply held beliefs. That's where combining multiple kinds of learning can help. Combining multiple kinds of learning can provide you with fresh perspectives to help you see your blind spots, to help you see the false beliefs that you're still holding on to, so that you can shine the light of awareness on them and burn them away. And here's the big secret that's really not a secret. All beliefs are false beliefs. No belief is true. No thought, no emotion, no concept, no opinion, no fact. Nothing that can have an opposite can be true, including this statement. So if you want to intentionally progress your consciousness in Tier 2, and or your spiritual development, in other words, wake up and become enlightened, the journaling methods I've described in this video, especially when combined with other kinds of active learning, can be a very efficient and effective way to do that. Yes, it can be tough and confronting, but it actually turns out to be one of the least painful ways of making real progress. How badly do you want to progress? This is a real question. It's perfectly fine to decide not to progress your consciousness or spiritual development. Most people don't significantly progress their consciousness once they reach physical adulthood, and most people never progress very far in spiritual development at all. It's very normal to find a stage that's at equilibrium with your surrounding culture and then stay there. In fact, doing anything other than that is basically insane. But if you happen to have that bug in your bonnet that makes you want to track down the truth, then staying where you are is never going to satisfy you. Sorry, you have a tough road. I recommend a sense of humor. It helps. And yes, spiritual autolysis takes time. Real transformation takes time. But seriously, what else are you doing with your life that's so important? Without knowing the truth, how can you possibly be of any real use to anyone else? And besides, it's not like you do all of this work and then don't get anything back until you reach the end. The journey itself is highly rewarding. Every step you make, every slightly better relative truth you grasp, gives you a little more wisdom and a little more freedom. So go ahead, try it out. What have you got to lose? Try to write something true, and then keep trying. If at each attempt you can look back on what you wrote previously and be amazed at how naive you were, you're doing great.